Get ready for some tech talk over coffee, where we filter through the latest digital tech one sip at a time. Welcome to The Filtered Brew, a tech podcast all about software. Your host is digital consultant Preston Hurd. So join us for a cup of coffee, and let's get into what's brewing on today's menu. In this fourth and final chapter within the document generation series, your host, Preston Hurd, dives even deeper into the document generation features and capabilities. We'll cover template capabilities and the out-of-the-box features of leading DocGen automation tools. We compare how platforms like Conga Composer, SDocs, MergeUp, Nintex, and Templafy handle template formats, dynamic content, and AI, highlighting the trade-offs between simplicity, flexibility, and personalization. This discussion explains why choosing the right template framework is critical for scaling document creation, emphasizing factors like supported file types, like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and HTML, as well as logic controls and automation depth. This episode wraps up by connecting document generation to the broader document management ecosystem, underscoring how integration and automation are critical for modern Salesforce-driven organizations. For this chapter, you're going to need a refill. So grab another cup of coffee and let's figure out how we can use this tech to stir up some revenue. So to start, how about the topic of template capabilities?
Yeah, that's the next thing we want to look at. Template capabilities is very important. And specifically, this component, template capabilities, we're talking about, what supported template file types with each one of these solutions. DocGen tools really vary in their support for template formats, such as Microsoft Word, PDF, Excel, PowerPoint, or HTML. And compatibility with familiar editing tools, these tools like Word that non-technical users use every day, covers really the vast majority of the use cases, while HTML or JSON formats might need to be more for like a developer for like the complex styling to really make something quote unquote fancy. But it's just important to understand which formats are supported natively with each of the solutions and whether there's layout controls or dynamic content behavior that's different across the different types. So customers should really understand what for their company's use case, there's a lot of different varying use cases, what file outputs are needed. So let's look at a handful of these vendors. Let's start out with the big player in the space, Conga Composer. They make building templates in Word, Excel, PowerPoint easy and familiar, preserving things like brand styles, custom fonts, layouts with some deep technical customization. Templates themselves are standard Office, Microsoft Office files, making maintenance pretty straightforward for non-technical users. Now, let's compare that to the other vendor that we talked about earlier, SDocs. It's a different scenario with SDocs because SDocs is, we talked about their integration type. They have HTML driven templates. So you're not going to get as much of that familiar, Microsoft Office file experience. Let's also look at Conga and how they handle dynamic visibility by defining multiple Salesforce queries. And then we call these row burners. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. It's which rows appear by query condition. We're getting a little technical here, but what that gets into is if statements. And if statements are supported inside templates for simple dynamic text swaps, there's an absence of nested ifs and full block conditionals. So that limits complex personalization. I just said a bunch of technical stuff. And what does that really mean? It means personalization. So if you compare that to the capabilities of MergeUp, for example, dynamic JavaScript-based flexibility, which provides virtually unlimited flexibility to create any type of format, look and feel that you want. So, there's some different variations there. And then I also want to talk about AI here with MergeUp in particular. They have an AI template generation and they also support JavaScript, as I said earlier. So that enables this very complex template creation. And on the technical side, their JavaScript capabilities really unlock the advanced use cases that are challenging or even impossible for a lot of the other solutions to handle. So incorporating that JavaScript template, having the AI template generation capability built in really provides a lot more flexibility and a lot more breadth of what can be done. So again, consider if that's important to you for your use case, but there are options out there that do leverage tech like that. So wanted to talk about them in this podcast.
Nintex. Wanted to talk about Nintex as it relates to template capabilities specifically because they really have a focus on the Microsoft suite of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, docs, and template creation with those document types. It allows for basic branding preservation, but want to talk about them as it relates to things that are a little bit more complex or dynamic because it really has simple if logic and constrained dynamic document control. I'm specifically talking about if statements. So if you're using a Word doc and the field code syntax that goes with that, which can show true false outputs, but it lacks broader section visibility control and it lacks nested logic. So this approach, while it's good for straightforward use cases, it feels fairly constrained. And since those features are available in other solutions, wanted to really kind of highlight the difference of something that's simple versus being able to add that dynamic component to it.
Makes sense that this would be very important because once the admin sets up the template, then all of the users are going to be using that same template.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why it's so important. We got a little technical there, but that's why it's so important that you look at what technically can and can't be done. Because once the CRM admin sets up that template, maybe they use AI to do it. But whatever they do to build that template, maybe they just use a standard Word doc, but that doesn't have as much flexibility like we talked about. That's really important to get right because that's what all the users in the org are going to be using on a daily basis. So that template has got to be perfect and why it's so important, why we wanted to cover that.
What about the out of the box features?
Yeah, that's really the last thing I think that we should look at, and then we'll move on from all this technical stuff. But, out of the box, there are some advanced solutions that offer different intelligent features or smart features. You've probably heard the term that enable conditional content rendering. They can enable dynamic tables. They can auto-generate charts based on real-time Salesforce data. So think about all those bells and whistles that you can leverage, like having a chart, having a table within your document. Some tools, like I mentioned, also incorporate AI-assisted features or adaptive templates that adjust based on the user, the region, or the record context. So these features really make it personalize and streamline the personalization. That's really what it's all about is personalization and really improving the overall quality of the documents that are generated. So customers, when you're looking at a solution, they should explore what smart features come out of the box versus requiring custom configuration And whether AI capabilities are explainable and trainable and make sense, while not always a must-have for every company, these features can, generally offer a lot of improvement for the overall quality and then the final results. And there's a learning curve. There's overall experience needed in interacting with the tool, and for the admin in particular, that not just the user who's clicking generate document and bring in all the Salesforce data, but for the admin as well that's setting all this up. So, these smart features and AI as a component of that, I think is really important for most companies, depending upon their use case, to determine if they really need that. And I think in most cases, it makes a lot of sense versus for some, maybe more traditional historic companies, maybe it's just a flashy add-on that they wouldn't use. But I think in general, it's something that offers significant value to the overall process. So that's really, what we're talking about when we talk about features. If we break down the vendors again, Conga supports batch docgen versus list views and reports. And this functionality requires an add-on purchase. You got to consider cost. It's not only Conga, it's Conga Composer, Conga Batch, Conga Trigger licensing. To the best of my understanding, that's how it works as an add-on. But workflow automation is possible, and flow integrations with Salesforce is possible by setting this up with patterns and APIs. But the solutions are really generating documents in the Salesforce Experience Cloud portals for authenticated users. However, the guest user generation is not supported. And so inside public sites, it might be limiting as far as the heavy customizations that you can do. They also support smart features, permitting advanced JSON manipulations for dynamic data injection, allowing more custom merges. But that requires Apex or middleware to unlock these features effectively. So that offers less immediate usability compared to the other vendors in this space. Another one that I looked at that does have some components of AI as well is Templafy, and both MergeUp and Templafy have some built-in dynamic functions. So Templafy, another one that I think you should look at with a different type of AI capabilities, but also built-in dynamic functions. Another one to consider as far as cutting-edge companies in this space.
There's also the next step in all this, that is document management. Why was this topic not included?
Yeah, that's a good question. We really dove deep into the DocGen automation. We talked about integrations in particular. And one thing you got to consider when you're talking about integrations is how are you going to integrate with that next step? Integration plays a vital role. I view them really as a Venn diagram where you have DocGen on one side and you have doc management on the other side. Hopefully that gives you a good high level of DocGen, the subcategories within DocGen, how it relates to other categories that are adjacent or overlapping with the Venn diagram, like document management software. It's complex stuff, but it saves time. It makes teams more efficient and more effective, and it makes a lot of sense for most companies to bring on a solution like this. Hope it's helpful.
Definitely helpful, really diving into the features and capabilities of DocGen. And I'm sure that our listeners will take away a lot from this entire series, especially as they explore the different software solutions available to them. So that wraps up our 4-part series on DocGen. Thanks so much for listening to the Filtered Brew podcast. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and took away some insights that you could apply to your own DocGen strategy. Be sure to visit thefilteredbrew.com. It's the place to go for all your digital sales and marketing consulting needs, and where you can find more episodes, resources, and updates from the team. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to follow, rate, and share the show. It really helps us grow and reach more listeners like you. This has been the Filtered Brew Podcast, where conversations are crafted, refined, and brewed to perfection. Until next time, keep those ideas brewing and visit thefilteredbrew.com.